I'm going to stop that music because it makes me happy. I'm not happy right now. Welcome to the first Scary Alvarez skull session, post game chat between me and you, except for you don't get to talk. Perfect. So let's get right into it. Very, very tough 31-22 loss in Pullman to Washington State this past Saturday evening. And I know a lot of things did not go right for the Badgers, and I'm not going to be here to argue that it did. Uh, the running game, some of the offensive line play, frankly, some of the heart and fire in the first half was missing where it normally be there. But I'm also here to try and talk some of y'all back from the ledge. One of the things I do, I'm not sure it's masochistic by its very nature, is that I kind of take a survey of where the fan base is, Badger fan base, after every game, during the game, but also after. And not shockingly, because I think we're sort of trained to do this. Uh, Not everyone, but a number of Wisconsin fans have gone off the deep end after first two games of the season. Uh, and I'm here to tell you and demonstrate why that is totally incorrect, the wrong way to do it, and it's going to be okay. So, a lot of things didn't work. We could sit here for a half an hour and detail and catalog what those things are. I think enough of you have done that. Where I'm gonna flip it a little bit. I'm gonna talk about some of the things that did work, and we'll go from there. The passing game, it worked. There were some issues with sacks and protection, but Tanner Mordecai showed in a probably the toughest environment that he is going to face this season in terms of the crowd, the conditions, night game, evening game, things like that, and a really solid defense. He proved that he is a big time quarterback and he can get things done. Did we score 50 points? No, we didn't. But after falling behind 24-6, some lesser teams would have packed it in. And Longo threw Mordecai and the rest of the offense going forward after that big deficit in the first half showed resiliency. So I like the way that Mordecai played. Chimere DK, despite the fact that we've had a number of high impact transfers, we had some good guys in the receiving room besides Chimere DK coming into the season, obviously, and saw some of that in the game. DK is proving now in the second game that he is the undisputed leader of that wide receiver room, that he's going to be showing up every game with his best. So that's very encouraging to see that. That's a homegrown Paul Christ recruit that came up through the system, and despite the system change, he has not missed a beat. In fact, I think he's gotten better since last season. Hunter Waller, again, not here to make this a negative thing where I'm calling out individuals, but there have been some soft spots in the secondary. But Hunter Waller sure as hell is not one of them. Lightning to the ball, hard definitive hits, cleaning up the mess, so to speak. And as noted by some others, including Lockdown Badgers, he is one of the top 3 or 4 tacklers in all of NCAA football through 2 weeks. Now, ideally, that's a linebacker having those stats. If it's a safety, that may mean, depending on the system, that things are sneaking through the front seven or front six or front five, depending on the alignment Wisconsin's playing in a moment. But Waller has been truly incredible. I'm not just saying that because he sat down for a tremendous interview that I'd love you to watch with yours truly, the greatest interview he ever will sit down for, even after he's in the pros. But Waller has been fantastic. So and again, Mordecai, DK, and Waller, there were other players who James Thompson Jr., for reasons we'll talk about, had a tremendous safety sack that was stripped from him, which is ridiculous, and I'll go into that in a moment. But anyway, that was positive. Another thing I found positive was the post game. Despite the fact that people like me and fans can complain about aspects like officiating or the game flow or things like that, Fickle came into that room, calmly, definitively took ownership of that entire game. He did not blame the refs, which a coach should not ever do. He did not say this is just a get acquainted kind of season where we're working through our systems and next year is going to be we'll really have the air raid installed, well, the Fickle system. And he says he can win with this team. And he was obviously frustrated with the fact that he did not. And I really like that too. I happen to believe that the best version of this team won't show itself until next season and beyond. But that does not mean for 1 second that this year's version, as talented as it is, with as many hardworking, dedicated kids as it has, cannot gel into a very good team. And I think it will. Saturday wasn't the day. But I like Fickle's ownership. I liked his positivity. He did not shy away and try and find blame for it. And that was a great thing. Um, Another thing I found, this is kind of a strange, sounds a little strange maybe, but as bad as falling behind 24-6 in the first half of your first real test of the season is far from ideal. Not letting the game be over at that point, coming back, and frankly, there were towards the end of the third quarter, I was very convinced that Wisconsin was going to win this game, and if some things had gone a little differently, I think they would have. The resiliency that the team showed to come back from a horrible deficit in a very difficult, very hostile environment, that showed me maybe as much or more than the loss did, as far as negatives would go. I was very impressed with that, and it's obviously I would have liked them to finish it, but it did not happen. But that does not mean we cannot find positives in that. And you know, we can talk a little bit about some other things. Like this isn't going to be a long recording, but I do want to talk about the officiating. There is a certain mindset, and I'm a tough guy. I can rip arms. I'm a former wrestler. I can do it. I can do that. I can rip arms off people. So this isn't a question of not being tough. But that is not a standalone where if your team does not play well and ends up losing a close, tight game like happened in Pullman on Saturday night, that you cannot then comment on other factors like officiating that could have played a huge role in that. Let me explain. Wisconsin, and by some accounts, did not play well enough to win. I agree and disagree with that because, yes, they didn't get the job done. Washington State got the victory, and I'm not going to say they didn't deserve it. But two plays, two major plays. Okay, James Thompson Jr., and I've seen 6 different angles and had several fights on social with Washington State people, myopic Washington State people who are going to end up in the Big Sky Conference, wherever the hell they're going to be next year. Good for them. Saying that, oh no, the tackle began when the quarterback was outside the end zone. Two things to that. The ball, when that happened, was on the goal line anyway. And secondly, the rule, that's not what the rule says. The quarterback is in a play. So it's not like the quarterback was forward and then Thompson grabbed him at the 3 and then drove him back into the end zone. You see plays like that happen all the time. Of course, that's not a safety. It's a bang, bang play. But what should have happened was the replay official should have taken the time to really look at the play, the flow of the play, where it happened, where the initial contact was, and what the rule actually says. And that should have been a safety. That is an egregious miscall. Yes, okay. 2 points, Badgers get the ball back. That's a big 2 points in the course of the game. And to dismiss it as, well, our offensive line didn't play well and gave up sacks, and our running game didn't come to play, so therefore it doesn't matter anyway. We shouldn't even care about that stuff. That just doesn't make sense. Listen to yourself when you say things like that. You're pretending that a game is not the sum of its parts. Every part matters. So yes, it does matter. A major blown call like that does matter. It always matters. That does not mean you cannot find fault and blame in other aspects of your team's performance, but that does matter. Number two, the more egregious in my estimation, Ches Malusi, the fumble. That was one of those things where he's down, the ball's out, Washington State picks it up, and then everyone just kind of assumes, oh, because they're celebrating and they have the ball, that must have been a fumble. That again could have gone either way, but I thought that was also a blown call and a tremendously important call in the flow of the game. I sort of likened it in some ways, though that was much earlier in the fourth quarter, to the Danny Davis fumble against Oregon in the Rose Bowl in 2020. If that fumble doesn't happen, Wisconsin wins, beat Justin Herbert in Oregon. They win that game. When that fumble happened with Ches Malusi, I know there was still opportunities for the Badgers to win that game, but that, for all intents and purposes, was the one thing too many to overcome. And to say that no, Jack Nelson missed a couple blocks, so therefore that fumble blown fumble call didn't matter. Listen to yourself. That's ridiculous. I cannot say it definitively tilted the game, but it was a huge thing to overcome. Now, backing up a little bit, don't dig yourself into a 24-6 hole. And yes, those things won't be as relevant. But in the flow of the game, as it did happen, calls do matter. Pac 12 officials have a well earned reputation for home cooking. I cannot imagine that hard earned reputation has softened any, given the situation with the Big Ten pulling four of the teams from the conference and ultimately killing the conference. Uh, so yeah, the cook might have been in a little bit. I don't think there was a meeting before the game where the official said, "Let's screw the Wisconsin Badgers in this game." I think it's more just the attitude of this official of the Pac-12 officials. And this isn't the first time. Obviously, the Joel Stave game from 2013 when he unquestionably surrendered himself. Game should have stopped. Ball should have been marked, and the Badgers got screwed. That was probably a little worse than these two. But if you add these two up, it's the same result. Anyway, I feel like that is well, that was a terrible thing, and you are not any less of a man or woman if you mention that those calls were blown. Okay, it doesn't mean you're not a tough guy. It doesn't mean you cannot accept that Wisconsin's performance was not ideal because it was not. But it's okay to say, yeah, in this basket of things that happened in that game, those two calls were kind of a big deal. You cannot say it didn't lose the game for Wisconsin. You cannot say it, just like I cannot say Wisconsin would have won without them. Cannot do it. Anyway, uh, I had to get that off my chest, and I think this is all common sense. Last thing I'm going to say today is going forward, overreaction. Okay, I alluded to this earlier. I understand it's the nature of message boards. People are emotional. It doesn't cost any money to post a comment or post a tweet or whatever the hell they're calling it, to post an X. Hey, nice name, Musk. I'll post an X. That's great. It's good stuff. Very original. Um, but you would think that this team was 3-5 or something and had just gotten blown up by Purdue and lost to Ohio State at home by 40. That has not happened. Everything that this team wants to accomplish this season is 100% in front of it still. Nobody in their right mind thought this was going to be a 13-0 Wisconsin team. All right, or 12-0 going into the Big Ten championship. No one thought that. No one who's being realistic thought that. I did not think that. Now, that said, work to do, much work to do. This team, as I mentioned in my article with Bucky's fifth quarter, say it, it might not be fun to say it, but this team is in a soft rebuild. It does not mean it's not talented or well coached. It doesn't mean there isn't great effort, but there are things happening right now that there are growing pains associated with these transitions from a system, and we're seeing them. Now, are we missing playmakers on defense? I mentioned Hunter Waller, he's one guy, and there's other talented players that are making plays, but unquestionably losing a couple NFL guys like Herbig and Benton, and really, frankly, not replacing him with guys of that caliber is going to require more of a team effort, and it's going to show up. Are those guys going to rise? James Thompson Jr. showed that he can do it. Are other guys going to step up? Are they going to step up and make these plays? Remains to be seen. Hasn't happened a lot so far, but there were moments there where I saw that defense clicking. By the same token, that defense, the way it started, being down 24-6 in the second quarter, that didn't reflect the kind of intensity that defense is going to have to approach these games with. Yes, Cam Ward is a good quarterback. That's a tricky offensive system to defend, tough environment, tough crowd, but that doesn't matter. You get down 24-6 to Ohio State's curtains. You get down 17-6 against Ohio State's curtains. And that is a game that I have at the beginning of this season, and I continue to, even after seeing what I saw on Saturday night. That is a Wisconsin victory. That is a take. Wisconsin can beat that Ohio State team. I'm not sure if you've watched Ohio State play. They are incredibly talented and they are incredibly beatable. And that game in Camp Randall in late October, I'm still calling it as a Wisconsin victory. We're going to see that happen. But in order for that to happen, this team has to keep growing and adjusting and coming into its own, and it's going to have to do that. So, looking ahead to next week, Georgia Southern, not a bad team. This is not going to be a pushover. I'm not sure if any of you noticed, but unfortunately, I'm apparently a masochist of some sort, and I checked up on our first opponent's next game, Buffalo, and Buffalo lost to an FCS opponent at home. Not ideal. Every game is different, but That's just kind of a throwaway, and that's not a good team. Maybe not the team we thought they'd be, but that doesn't matter. Georgia Southern's going to roll in. That's going to be a team that's going to come in. They're going to think they can beat Wisconsin. So Wisconsin is going to have a good week of practice, come in with the right mindset, stick to what it's trying to do, take what the defense is giving it. And that's another thing. Another positive. I'm not sure if I mentioned this. Phil Longo. Well, a 22-point performance is not spectacular. And by the way, Vaco's the kicker. Heads up, good kicker, good get. One of our sort of lower profile transfer portal pickups from the MAC, but he made things a lot easier by making those field goals. But getting back to what I was saying, uh, Longo again showed the flexibility of his air raid offense, and you have your two potential All Big Ten running backs getting stuffed repeatedly by Washington State. What happens? Mordecai has a great game. It wasn't the most overwhelming statistical game, but if you watch the throws he was making, and he didn't hit all of them, there were some deep balls that there's always something on fades and things like that you want to do better. But Mordecai was locked in, and he showed exactly the kind of ability and resiliency. Took some hard hits that I know first attracted Fickle to try to get him in the portal. So that's a huge positive. And the air raid, if it isn't working on the ground, we can beat you in the air. Well, it's still a little clunky here and there. In the first game, it showed it we could beat you on the ground. If the air stuff isn't working, the second game we showed you the opposite. I do think this offense will continue to get better and better and better. And as the offensive line clicks a little more, and there's still some kinks to work out, and hopefully getting Renfro back will help, although Bortolini has held his own at center. I do think that better days are ahead for this offense. I think better days are ahead for this offense, and I look forward to the Purdue game, first Big Ten game. It's gonna be a night game, tricky, tough, hostile environment against a solid team that just won a tough roadie at Virginia Tech. That is going to be the true coming out party for this Badger team. I do believe that. There are going to be plenty of people doing the Purdue special, remembering the game against Ohio State a few years ago when they beat a highly ranked Buckeye team, blew them out there, and it's not just the fact that Purdue hasn't beat us since I believe George W. Bush was president. Um, I just think that is the one I have circled as the true coming out game when this offense is going to be humming. But have some patience. Again, this whole season, although we will improve, is going to be in its fundamentals a soft rebuild. So keep the faith, Badger fans. It's okay to be mad about refs. It's okay to be disappointed with the performance, but this is okay. We are okay. This team is going to be fine. And the success that it was going to have in our minds, although many of us built it up maybe a little more than we should have, is all still in front of this team. So let's go. Anyway, the Dawn is signing out. Thanks for listening. Going to be on later this week with someone you may have heard of. Scary Alvarez podcast, episode 10, with the great, the incomparable Barry Alvarez. So stay tuned for that one.